my friends. Thanks for tuning in. This is our first session of our question answering program. We're going to do this about once a month, and we're going to collect up your questions, and I'll do my best to try to work my way through them and answer them. So let's get on with it. The first question is, how do you see fundamental Christians and Muslims responding to the kind of changes you are predicting? That's an interesting question. The big variable in that space, it seems to me, is that if in the coming years you really have disclosure about extraterrestrial life, then what you really have is the possibility that all of the religions in the world are threatened in one way or another, or most of the religions, or at least the major ones. And that all of the concepts of God and so on get called into question. And that, it seems to me, is the most significant kind of threat to the existing religions. There's also the possibility, and one of the wild cards is the possibility of a solar flare sometime around 2027. And if something like that happened, then of course it would have extraordinary and very broad and sweeping implications, and certainly work its way into religion as well. But in the midterm, it seems to me that the more conservative religions, including some in Protestantism as well, are going to potentially have a real problem with the whole notion that the God and the way the universe works is not quite what they thought it was, and so they're going to have to adapt. Second question is, are you going to take the vaccine? No, I'm not. Third, can you address the coming new energy medicine healing paradigms and safe body-mind healing practitioners or centers that are waiting to emerge or contact as we go through this amazing time of disclosure and ascension? I am convinced that energy medicine and energy therapies are the fundamental kind of approach of the future. Really quite apart from anything you might have seen in Star Trek, which frankly are really just an extension of the basic premise that everything is made out of energy, and that the higher you get up in the kind of the food chain of energy, the higher you get into that whole spectrum, the more profound impact you have all the way down. Any kind of interventions like medicines and nutrients and whatever kind of pills or whatever you want to take, are all way down the kind of the food chain, if you will, the influence from way at the top, which is where if you can get into the top and affect the energy and the energy signature and the essential kind of configuration of the signature, which is your body and the different aspects of your body, then you're way above where you come in, whether you do it with pills or other kinds of things. And so I think the future very much is in that. As a matter of fact, we've got a project we've been working on for some time here at the Arlington Institute that will in fact take advantage of and try to be in the kind of the leading edge of being able to do energy medicine. I'm surrounded here by a number of kind of devices that I use that are all subtle energy in one way or another that all purport to influence you at the most fundamental level. So I think that that's really where the future lies in terms of healthcare. How soon will we be able to visit our local hardware store and purchase a low-cost sheet of thin steel roofing composite that is coated with 25% efficient photovoltaic thin film materials? 5 years, 10 years? It's largely a function of probably the government and secret programs and things like that. I remember maybe 15 years ago when there was an inventor somewhere around Detroit, whose name escapes me right now, who said that he had 75% efficient photovoltaic cells. And that would have been such a significant threat to the whole electrical energy generation industry that for some reason he just kind of disappeared after a while. There's always a possibility he didn't have what he had, but as I remember it was fairly convincing. And so these kinds of technologies, particularly if they're disruptive of the existing kind of system, are slow in coming into the commercial application. I wouldn't be surprised if that you start to see things along this line within about 5 years. And the reason why I say that is because what I'm thinking is that climate change is inbound and it's going to get cold, and there is going to be a real push to trying to find alternative ways in which to generate electricity in order to provide heat in opposition to or as a replacement for fossil fuels. And so I suspect that's inbound here pretty quick. I mean, they're talking about 25% efficient ones, and 25% is not a whole lot more. The average ones right now run 17, 18% or something like that. Bearing in mind the forecasted financial crashes, what actions do you recommend for protecting financial holdings? You know, I don't recommend any actions other than I would suggest that, and this is what I would do, is to I would get in touch with some financial advisor who follows Martin Armstrong and his Socrates program. Martin Armstrong's computer program, which he calls Socrates, is the most accurate predictive kind of program that's around, or certainly out in the open. And it has extraordinary accuracy. It's never been wrong. Extraordinary accuracy in predicting markets, financial markets, as well as geopolitical things and other such stuff. And so that would certainly be my suggestion. Go find somebody that follows Martin and uses his computer as the basis for that. Have you heard of being called Maitreya, and who might be helping guiding folks in Washington, D.C.? If so, what are your thoughts on that? I have heard of Maitreya in the past. I haven't heard recently, but last I heard, he was in London. He was an avatar or some equivalent to something close to that. I didn't realize he was in Washington, D.C., and I don't know more about that. I'd be interested in it. If somebody knew more about that, you could let me know. Would you talk about the spiritual and other dimensional beings who are helping and guiding us at this time of great revolutionary progress? Thank you. I just yesterday, I guess it was. Today is Monday, and yesterday, and today is Monday the 17th, is it? 18th. Monday is the 18th of January. And yesterday I did in kind of a segment with Robert David Steele, about 20-minute segment. And what I talked about primarily was, or somewhat, was the Pleiadians, this group from the Pleiades that has a long-term interest in this planet and humanity, and are kind of standing by to be helpful and nurturing and in any way. I've heard and read a variety of kind of reports, some that suggest as many as 26 different alien groups are engaged in one way or another. Some are fairly passive and just observing. There are others that are more actively involved. There's, and the awareness of the whole stellar community is becoming far more obvious, and there's clearly disclosure going on coming out of the Department of Defense, and that is, there's there's two aspects of that, and one is the existence of these kinds of folks and what they do and where they go. The other piece of it is germane to this question, and that is how are they interfacing with us and how are they interacting with us? And there are multiple sources. The Law of One, there are lots of them, including Barbara Marciniak's books on the Pleiadians, who all say that they exist in this space. Their function in this area is to help us. And the question is, do you ask them? They're not going to help. They're not going to do anything that you don't ask them for. And so the whole kind of way to engage and to get that benefit is to actively ask them. And that's like praying or just asking or going outside and looking at looking up at the sky, and however you want to do it, because they clearly are far superior to us in terms of their abilities, and they can monitor human beings at the kind of the energetic and the telepathic kind of level. And so I think that's part of the evolutionary process of humans, is this opening up to this larger awareness and the active engagement in these other spaces. I also think, by the way, that sometime in the not too distant future, then some of these alien groups are going to make themselves really quite obvious here in the third dimension, and that could happen within a year, as a matter of fact. The world is awash in concern over global warming, with the rationale that world scientists agree that this science shows the warming to be factually true. However, there are some scientists that dispute this. Some even argue the world is already entering a cooling period. Apparently, even NASA has recently stated that climate models are missing certain parameters, which could vary results. Based upon your latest information and understanding, what do I think? I think it's going to get cold. I think that the models have all been wrong, with the exception, I think, of one Russian one, which in fact says that it's going to get cold and not warm. I think there's a great deal of kind of corruption and in that process, and that it's not being accurate at all, that there are political objectives. Early on, maybe 6 years ago, I did over an hour and 20-minute maybe video just going over everything that I knew about global climate change, and I came to the conclusion, which I still hold, that it's going to get cold. And as this questioner suggests, there is increasing science that says that it's not getting warmer, it's getting cold. Now, it's a transition period, and so there are places that are warmer and places that are colder in a complex system. A complex system, when you get a state change in a complex system, It commonly, a complex, an example of this would be water, and when water changes its state from being liquid to solid, when it freezes, for instance, if you look at the 1 degree kind of place where the transition is between liquid and solid, what happens is you start to get little crystals in the water that freeze, little individual crystals that are randomly around throughout the liquid. And then it starts to get clustering around those. And then boom, then all of a sudden you get a rapid kind of broad-based universal kind of shift to the new level. And that's what it seems to me is happening in terms of climate change. You're starting to get crystals, little indications around. This last winter it was only 1 degree colder than it's ever been measured before on the planet in Siberia. It was, there were, last year in January and February, there was a foot of snow in the northern Sahara Desert, each of those 2 months. There were ice that never melted in Scotland all summer long last year. There are just lots of indications to suggest that all of the prognostications about it getting warmer are just not true. There are localized places, obviously, localized things, and those are kind of weather things rather than climate things. If you look long range over the kind of the general trend, which I think you're going to see a rapid and increasingly accelerating move into becoming very cold. What it looks like is that by about 2023, it will be very clear that the trend is, I mean, already there's more ice in Greenland than there has been for a long time, and there's ice building up in the Arctic, where the predictions for years where there wasn't going to be, by all of these scientists, was that there wasn't going to be ice in the Arctic in the summertime, and there's ice in there's all kinds of ice all over the place. And so all these predictions have been wrong. And where there has been melting, interestingly enough, it often can be correlated to underwater submarine volcanoes. And so it's isolated in places and where they've been able to look and find these things. They find that there's underwater volcanoes that are generating heat up. And that, by the way, is probably the source of El Nino, the big heating thing that happens, activity that happens out in the middle of the Pacific. It comes from underwater volcanoes. And that's not in anybody's equation in terms of meteorology or climate change kind of people. They're all, and by the way, they don't have any factoring of the effects of the sun and changes in the sun as well. And so, and the sun is going through changes that clearly presage and indicate and point toward it becoming a time of cooling rather than warming. Craig Braden says that the actual cyclical heating up of the planet, says after the actual cyclical heating up of the planet, there will come an ice age again. I would like to know when that will be, more or less, 20 years, 100 years or later. Like I say, it's soon. It's more like 2023, and the best information that I have is that it lasts about 60 years or something, more or less, you know. It's hard to tell. That has huge kind of implications, by the way, because of what it does is and by the way, it's mostly in the northern latitudes. And the most interesting kind of report, or the specific report that I've read about that, suggests that, you know, from Minnesota up in North America, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, Montana, and so on, is Wisconsin. Those are going to be places that it's really going to be cold. And what they suggest is the likelihood that ice will not melt in the summertime. This is not an ice age where you've got, feet of ice all over the place. It's just a mini ice age, in that it really gets cold and it doesn't get warm. It sounds to me like Canada is going to be cold all the time. When in 2022 is a burst of energy from the center of the galaxy supposed to hit the Earth? I don't know about 2022 in particular. The general kind of activity is this. There are multiple things going on here at the same time. In the first case, the Earth's magnetic field is collapsing, and so you're getting less and less protection from the energy from the sun, and so you get increasing amount of cosmic rays from the sun that are hitting the Earth just because of the magnetosphere, the collapse of the magnetosphere. What's happening is you're getting a magnetic pole shift that is in the process, and when it flips, it collapses, and then it flips, and then it expands again. As I remember, there's another question here about that that relates to that. When that happens, by the way, it affects all of life, all organic life on the planet. And so, because when those rays come down, and so it affects human beings, it affects your sleeping habits and other kinds of things. I had a friend who had a wife who was working in Russia back, this was 8 or 10 years ago, and she came back and said there was a full two-page spread in Pravda back then that was telling the Russians that if they were having a hard time sleeping and they were have aches and pains or whatever it was, not to worry about it. It was the magnetic field that was changing, and there wasn't anything they could do about it. They need to kind of get used to it, I guess. And so you've got the collapse of the magnetic field, and what you have at the same time is that you do have waves of energy that are coming out of the center of the galaxy. And I've noticed even in the last month or so a report that there's an increased kind of energetic wave. And so you have this series of waves. What they do is, of course, they hit the Earth, and those are not kind of predictable in any kind of way, so it's just not 2027. I think what this questioner is kind of referring to is the possibility of a solar flare, and if that's and we can talk about that. But when the waves come out of the center of the galaxy, what happens is that it affects the sun, and it affects other stars as well. And so then the sun behaves differently, and then it generates different output, and that affects all of us. What's also happening is that the solar system is moving into a different area of space, and the composition, the energetic composition of the space is different. And what that does is affect the behavior of the sun, and then the sun acts differently, and that's what is likely, if in fact it happens, that is what's likely to produce a solar flare. And it seems to be, and David Wilcock has done some good research in this area, and has shown that there's something like 26 different stars out in front of us moving into this space of different kind of energetics have had solar flares, and he and other people that I talked to are estimating that if that happens, it's likely to happen in about 2027. Do you know a book source yet? I don't know what that means. Thank you, John. Joni Astro, the astrologer, and Caleb Seth Pearl books are amazing. Do you know a book source yet? David Icke. I don't know what that means. Sorry. If we all buy into the electric vehicle market and we love the vehicles we are driving now, will these vehicles be able to be refitted with the latest technology? Thank you. Sure. Electric vehicles in particular will be, because they're all digital. My mechanic the other day told me that my Toyota Highlander, which is a hybrid, has God, what did he say? 500, 700 computers in the car. I knew that a lot of them have like 150 or something like that, but he said mine has a whole lot more. And what all that means is that you can change and up. It's like that's a computer after all. You can upgrade it, and you can change the software, and so that makes it easy to upgrade. And so I think electric vehicles are intrinsically upgradable in ways that more conventional automobiles are not. The problem with electric vehicles, of course, is that you got to make the electricity, and you make them in typically largely coal-fired power plants in the United States, and so you're just moving the pollution from one place to another place. Although there are other advantages. The big advantage to electric vehicles is the self-driving kind of function that the Teslas and some of the others are generating. What the future of that is that there's a place, I don't know, 10, 15 years from now where automobile accidents almost go down to nothing, go down, to 90, they decrease by 95% or 90, some great amount. And because if cars are self-driving and they're sensing everything around them, what happens is it significantly reduces accident. And so all of the whole issues associated with accidents, all of the injuries and the car repair places and and all of that kind of stuff all decreases significantly. I gave a talk 2 years ago to the Michigan State Patrol, to the leadership of the Michigan State Police, and I told them you're gonna have to find a new business downstream, because there aren't going to be any traffic tickets. There are not going to be any speeding tickets, because everything's going to be kind of self-controlled, and they're all going to be running, and there aren't going to be accidents. And so, so what are you going to do? So you're going to figure out something else that you got to do. What do you predict will happen in the financial market? What can we do to have our investments safe, I presume? Well, again, I'd go to Martin Armstrong. What Martin Armstrong says is that there are going to be major kind of changes in the financial markets in 2022, not next year, but the next year, and then 2027, as I remember it, big shifts, like collapses, like a big recession. He says the 20, I can't remember whether it's the 2022 or the 2020. I think it's the 2022 one is going to be 10 times worse than the one in 2008. So again, I'd suggest if you want to know more about that kind of stuff, you should plug into somebody who follows Martin. Will 2021 be the starting of a more kind and peaceful times? No, not yet. I think that we've got a good ways to go. Martin Armstrong's computer, again, and I refer to that because it's always been right, and it's really has a degree of granularity and detail that are really quite useful. Martin Armstrong says that it's going to be very uncertain for the next couple of years. He literally says that 2025 through 2027 is likely to be a civil war, and it's not just a localized American civil war; it's kind of like a global civil war, and it's almost like a reboot, if you will. not a reset in the terms that the World Economic Forum is using, but it's a reboot of the whole system, and where the old one, it kind of collapses and it gets reconfigured. And a lot of us would wish and are working toward hoping to keep that from being too severe. But there's no way that you get a new world without the old world going away in one way or another. And so there's a necessary kind of transition process. And to my way of thinking, the issue is how painful or not is it, and what we should be working on is to make it as smooth as possible. And but there is a time, maybe it's not till after 2025 or 26, where it suddenly turns. Now, Martin Armstrong says that by 2032, there is no United States as we know it. That there are 5 or 6 regional countries that used to make up the United States, and maybe Canada's part of that as well. He says there's no European Union. So what you're into in the next decade is essentially a period of time of extraordinary and fundamental kind of change, where the whole kind of working environment gets reconfigured. And it's after that it all turns and starts to go significantly positive. That's the kind of the conventional wisdom. Now, I mean the more advanced kind of conventional, it's not conventional wisdom, it's kind of the advanced, the leading edge out of the box. There is always the possibility that there are these wild cards. Say again that that this disclosure thing kind of blows up and the aliens show up and tell us how that life really doesn't work the way we think it is, and science isn't the same way, and education and religion are not the same. That could drive the whole system into a whole different kind of way, and it could mitigate some of the other things that otherwise would be the natural. What Martin Armstrong's system does is he understands the cyclical nature of all of the different kind of components, 72 different component parts of our reality and how it works. And what he's done is integrated them all into an artificial intelligence, an AI kind of based computer capability that then monitors all of the capital flows and where money moves all around, which then starts to and a whole bunch of other stuff, and that then telegraphs what in fact is happening and what's likely to happen, and so it is in a sense based upon kind of historical understanding, that is to say the historical cyclical nature of how different aspects of our life work. But I would guess that it may, I don't know. I don't know what provision it has for wild cards, for big surprise kind of things that come in and go somewhere else. It's been very accurate. It predicted COVID to the day. Didn't call it COVID, but it said something was going to happen. January 18th and 19th of January of last year, 2020. And bang, I mean, that's exactly when it happened. And so the program is very accurate in terms of the major kind of shifts in the underlying system. It is not specific about what is going to cause those. And so that raises a very interesting question about, how predictive, if there is some deterministic or predetermined kind of aspect of how this all behaves, and that we cannot, that some things happen regardless of what we would like and what we might do. But on the other hand, I think that there's a great deal of information that suggests that we all have a significant role to play manifest in the reality that we manifest, and therefore, if we change how we think, we'll do things like if we get rid of if we get more loving and compassionate, the weather turns nicer, the climate turns nicer. So in fact, some of these big things that are otherwise in the works, we could well change. What do I think of Bitcoin as an investment? I have no feelings about Bitcoin as an investment per se, and I hate to keep coming back to Martin Armstrong, but he has. I just went to his convention here 6 weeks ago, and so the kind of things that he was talking about are kind of fresh in my mind. Martin Armstrong says that every central bank is building blockchain-based coins and currencies, and that what he believes is that what they're going to do is, once they get those all in place, then what they're going to do is they're going to mandatorily swap out all Bitcoins and Ethereum and all of the other kind of blockchain coins that are existed for their official ones, and they will eliminate all the private blockchain-based currencies. In the meantime, there are going to be some significant increases, I'm told. I guess I don't, I have no reason to know anything about that, but that's what some folks are saying. But in the long term, it looks like the government, to the extent that they're successful in what they're trying to do right now, what it looks like is that they will try to capture that and dominate that again, and that will happen, not for the next couple or 3 years, I wouldn't think, at least. When are you going to have real frontline people from the secret space program, super soldiers, med bed manufacturers, Tesla free energy CEOs, deep underground clearing personnel, actual ETs, saved traffic children, cabal busting insiders, off-planet personnel, galactic alliance representatives, etc., etc. When am I going to have them? I don't know when I'm going to have them. I'm not being disrespectful or facetious. You're a futurist. What would you estimate on these types of multiple classes of disclosures? Thank you in advance. It's an interesting kind of dynamic from my point of view in my business, and that is there is the box is, let's say that the box is this big, huh? And I try to work outside of the box. And so there's a layer outside of the box of things that are that you can find kind of multiple substantive sources that indicate that there's something that exists outside of the box and that you can talk about. And that would be something like rapid climate change and it becoming cold rather than hot. That will have extraordinary implications. Another one, obvious one, is the whole business of disclosure. Another one would be the advent of over unity energy devices making their way into the commercial marketplace. You won't find much discussion about that inside of the box from the conventional stuff, but you can get outside of the box and you can see that the early indicators and the weak signals are pointing to those kinds of things. There's then a whole bunch of space way outside of the box, which is what this question is talking about, secret space program and all those kinds of things. And I don't know how to deal with that kind of stuff because I don't know what's real there for sure. I mean, there are a lot of reports from lots of people, and I know enough about how this whole works to know that there's multiple groups or individuals who are all trying to manipulate the narrative and trying to shape how things operate in the space. And I mean, it's obvious in spades in terms of this election and what's going on right now, and how they're deplatforming everybody and so on. And it's really hard to know what's true. So when somebody says that there's a what kind of device, I forget the name of it, the mirror or something, that'll let you go forward and backward in time or something like that. I find that interesting and intriguing, and I'm certainly not in a position to discount that. But I'm not George Norrie, and we're not. This is not Coast to Coast AM or some other kind of thing. I really kind of operate a little closer. I'm aware of all of those things. I keep an eye on them, because if you start to get enough kind of points, independent kind of corroboration of them, that you get a critical mass, then you start to say, yeah, there's really something there. But there's a lot of interesting indications that say that there's a secret script-based program. People like Catherine Austin Fitts certainly believes that there's one. I don't know. It'd be great on the History Channel or on whatever, Ancient Aliens or one of those, one of those kind of places. But I deal a little closer to home, but I try to follow all that stuff and try to just keep it in the back of my mind. There's a question. I live in Gaithersburg, Maryland. That's a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I'm feeling that it may not be the place to live. We are in our early 60s with a 21-year-old son. We're set financially. We have a condo in Virginia Beach. My friends are blind. I'm seriously looking into where to move. Berkeley Springs, Florida, Texas, even thinking about Mexico. Okay, so I don't know. The only thing that seems clear to me is that living in a big city is not a particularly good idea. And it all depends upon kind of who you are, and it's impossible for me to suggest to you what your situation is, not knowing your situation where it should be. But in general, the supply chains and the potential failure modes are much higher in big concentrated urban areas. The ability to control people is far greater in urban areas. Which is why some propose that the global agenda that that the UN and some of the proposals from the World Economic Forum are all trying to get people to move into the urban areas so that they can, in fact, then control them more. I live in a wonderful little town of 600 people out in the mountains of West Virginia, and I'm 100 miles from Washington, D.C. I drove to Baltimore and back today. So it's easy to get to the big city if you need to for something, but on the other hand, you have a significant degree of independence. At the same time, you don't have all of the kind of the amenities, and so we've got to go 30 miles to go to Costco or Best Buy or someplace like that. But you do have a greater chance to build some independence, particularly in terms of food and maybe even in terms of electricity and water and things like that, when you're not completely dependent upon the utilities and things that are in a large city. So, I don't know about Mexico or another country. There's a lot of uncertainty here, and particularly COVID, it has blown all kinds of uncertainty. That you've got governments that are doing all kinds of irrational things. So I don't know what to do about that. I have concerns about cryptocurrency, and if the United States becomes a socialist nation, how to best prepare and protect our finances. Do you think all countries will go crypto? Will it be better to own a home or to rent, or to live, and so on, where to live? In the short term, it sounds like I suggested. I mean, the things that I'm reading say, and again, I don't think there's anybody that's as good as Martin Armstrong. I mean, he's just been right all the time. And it's not him being right, it's his computer program that's right. And so that would be the best suggestion to me in terms of making those kinds of decisions. Do I think all countries will go crypto? Yeah, I think that's inevitable. What they're trying to do is get rid of paper currency. That's part of this great reset thing. And so when you get all digital stuff, then the governments can control you. They can control whether you get money or not. I mean, it's already possible for them in literally in a matter of less than a half an hour to shut off all your credit cards and all of they can literally shut off your car now so that it won't work, and so on. And I mean, they could lock you up, effectively lock you up to where you just can't go anywhere and you can't buy anything, and so on. And so so yeah, sure, they're going to cryptos. That's all part of the same thing. I think it would be naive to presume that cryptos cannot be hacked, and that in fact the government has not already figured out, that the NSA in particular has not figured out a way to get into them. And so it may in the short term provide some security, but in the end, and by the way, we're talking, those of you who have heard my talk in December know that I believe that there are two tracks here, and one of them is a technocracy that which is on the way of the World Economic Forum and COVID and all of these kinds of things are efforts to just use technology, whether it's in biology, biotech, or whether it's information technology or any financial, all of the rest of these kinds of things, to effectively kind of control you and put you in a situation where you cannot do anything that they don't want you to do. The other track, of course, is the one of personal development and this rising in your consciousness and your awareness, and being able to interface and engage in other dimensional kind of capabilities, and kind of release the extraordinary kind of intrinsic kind of capabilities that we all have as spiritual beings that are are an integral part of the larger source of all of life in this universe. And so we can manifest, we can do telepathy, we can do all kinds of things that they're trying to tell us that all their technology will do. And that is really the way you get independence in all of this space, is in this area, is to work yourself increasingly into this area where you have personal sovereignty, and you choose what you're going to do yourself, and you then actually begin to shape and manifest the local reality that you experience. Today, free speech is being crushed on social media because we're told domestic terrorists use these platforms to plan the, quote, storming of the Capitol, quote, over the period of weeks. At the same time, we're told the President of the United States is too dangerous to stay in office 10 more days because of a speech he gave directly before the storming of the Capitol. And my question is, how can both of these things be true? The lack of discernment or logical thinking has become commonplace, and even intelligent people fall for it. When we are surrounded by people determined to hand over the Bill of Rights to a technocratic or political overlord as soon as possible, what can the rest of us do to preserve the Republic, or at least the ideals that it was founded upon? I think that we are, in a sense, hopefully near the end of the domination of a great corrupt system that is running both our country and the world. That has been built over a great period of time, hundreds of years perhaps, likely, certainly. And that in these end times, what is both sides of the equation are doing their best to control the narrative, and so, and all holds, there are no holds barred. There are no rules. This is the ninth inning of the last game of the World Series, to use a baseball metaphor, and there are no rules. And so it is impossible to, in conventional kind of terms, to know what is really real, because they're controlling all of the media, and all of us get everything. We don't know anything that isn't mediated by some external kind of process or force or institution. All we know is what's happening around us locally with any kind of level of certainty. We get everything else over the computer or by somebody telling us, or from television or some other kind of thing, all of which are very actively being influenced in one way or another. I think more than that, there has been a long-term effort to effectively kind of condition the space for being able to kind of take this over and dominate it as this technocratic. The technocratic track is that I don't think that otherwise intelligent people capitulate and just believe all of this stuff, because that's just what happens. I think that whether you think that it's fluoride in the water, or chemtrails, or subliminal stuff in television and movies, or whatever it is, I don't know what it is, but I know that all of these things exist, and there's been a very active attempt and effort both to learn how to do that and refine those kinds of capabilities and those things in the past, but also certainly to deliver them, to put them in operation, operationalize them. And so there is a it is I don't think it's worth kind of arguing with anybody about it, because they see the world from their own point of view, and they are as convinced as you are that that what they think and what they say, because they get it reinforced, and they're looking at it at a limited set of sources, and they believe them. And so I don't know what you can do about all of that. I think that in conventional terms, what you can do is that you move back toward this issue of sovereignty, and this notion of that you really have the capability to fully, effectively define your own reality and to go forward in this space. And uh, and you don't need any outside input, and you certainly don't need others to acquiesce and agree with you in order to do that. What you do need to do is find a community. You need some supporting people around you to help kind of commonly move in the same kind of direction, because it's really hard, if not impossible, to just do this on yourself when everybody else thinks you're crazy or that there's some other kind of issue. But I think, again, and I would suggest that you go to Robert David Steele's. It's a robertdavidsteele.com, or to phi, P-H-I, beta, B-E-T-A, iota, I-O-T-A.com. And in there you'll see a video that I did with him yesterday. And what I believe is that no matter what happens, no matter what is presented to us, whatever is arrayed upon our horizon, there always has to be a safe path that provides hope through the middle of all of this stuff. And our job is to find that path. And it's not certainly not to fight the other guys or to convince anybody else or to evangelize the world, not for me anyway. But it's really to find those like-minded people who understand, who see the world with these kind of opportunities and this kind of hope and this new world, possibility of a new world, and find that, and that then starts to, it's again good to go back to the way ice kind of accretes, that you get these little kind of individual kind of pieces of crystal, and then you get clustering around it. Think about that in terms of social kind of systems, and where you get individuals who see the world in this new way, and then you get a clustering of like-minded people around them, and then there will be a place, presumably, that there will get a concentration that will then be able to head in a new direction. That's part of what we're working on here at the Arlington Institute, to try to build kind of a vision for this new world and try to understand the path going forward and how we get from there. But that's the way to do this. I mean, you can't fight the system. You can't fight this system. It just really is, because among other things, all it does is generate a lot of negative energy, and it then brings a lot of negative energy. It kind of comes to you. Question is, are banking institutions going to fail? Some will, almost certainly. But the whole system cannot fail, and the reason why is because if the whole system failed, it would drive huge amount of fear into the system, and it would kill the evolutionary push that we're all kind of betting on and trying to be a part of. There has to be hope. There's always hope in the middle of all of this, and what we have to do is find that. And if the whole financial system collapsed, there wouldn't be any hope. Well, certainly not for a while, and not all you'd be doing is trying to figure out how to, make things work. It's the same thing with the internet. The internet is not going to collapse. I mean, if the internet collapsed, we'd all be back kind of in this medium stone age or something like that. And we're past that, I think. And so the banking institutions are not going to fail, but certainly some of them are. Again, if you go to Martin Armstrong, what he says is that the central banks are setting up for the big banks to fail. I don't think the regional and the community banks will fail. But what are my plans for revealing your answers to our questions? Well, I'm making this video, and we're going to make it available to you, everybody that's on our list. This is going to be premium content for our premium content members, but we're going to make it available to everybody at first, for the first couple of them, so that you can get an idea about it and see if you like it and if you want to be premium content members. So we're going to If you're watching this video, you've got the answer to that question. You mentioned that in a 2-year period the world would begin a cooling period. Is that correct? Yes. I do believe we're headed for a cooling period, but how long was the time frame? About 60 years, like I said. That's what they say. Who knows? In this era of unprecedented rate of major changes, I don't, when I say who knows, I don't want to discount that the fact that it's coming or something. The question is, when you talk about how long is it going to be, who knows? I'm of the opinion, frankly, that if enough people we got on this new track toward this new world, and their lives revolve primarily around love and compassion and forgiveness and stuff like that, and that competition and fighting and the wars were not a part of that equation, there's a critical mass that you would where it would affect the weather, it would affect the sun, it would affect the earth, and so, in fact, you could do anything. You can change anything if you get a critical mass or a concentration around it, and it's well visualized and articulated. Theoretically, I think I theoretically know how to do that. I certainly don't know how to pull it off in terms of my own life on a predictable basis, but I think that the knowledge is starting to emerge. And again, it'll start to come together, and you'll get a critical masses of people who are starting to do this, and it will have a great deal of influence. And so these kinds of futures are all subject to change, because if people all get enlightened, and it could really change. It could be quite different, and it become quite much better quite sooner. In this era of unprecedented rate of changes, an era which you had predicted would arrive, what are your thoughts on the prospects of clean energy revolution anytime soon? The clean energy revolution, probably in terms that you're thinking about it, or most people think about it, is not the clean energy revolution. I mean, it takes more energy and produces more pollution to make solar cells and collectors than the net benefit from it. It's not intrinsically clean, and like I suggested, electric cars only push the electricity generation off over to the power plants, which have to produce it more, and certainly the coal-fired power plants are not clean, and so the clean energy revolution that I think is inbound is one where you have essentially generators that produce electricity with no significant input in either power or electricity, and that's not far-fetched. I know of 3 different ones that are, in some case, commercializable right now, that are you could manufacture them and distribute them, and other ones that are very close to that. And so there is a revolution that's coming, and so I certainly appreciate the value of trying to use the sun rather than other forces, options for fuel to make usable energy, but we don't do it very well. I mean, photosynthesis is a marvelous example of an effective way to do it, and we haven't figured out how to do it in such a subtle and highly efficient way as the plants do. But we do have some technology that's available to mostly rotating generators that use magnets and such, to electromagnets that can make electricity in great deals. And there's some other kind of technologies as well. And those have great potential for kind of doing a very broad-based and fundamental kind of revolution. And I think that that's what's coming. And like I say, there's some that it's just waiting on funding, literally. And if all other things being equal, and all other things may not be equal, but if they are, then you could, be a matter of 2 or 3 years away from having something that you could literally go buy, that you could put in your garage, and you could produce all the electricity you needed, and forever, and it wouldn't do anything, and maybe all you'd have to do is change the bearings every 5 or 10 years or something like that. Many of the events of the year 2020 are quite a surprise to me. Could you please give me a link to your 2019 annual talk to hear what you saw coming? Sure. You can find that on our website. I don't know offhand exactly where it is, but I know that the talk is there. But if you send an email to me at johnp@arlingtoninstitute.org, I'll get somebody to show you where to find it. How to refine personal discernment to wade through the morass of information, real or not. That's a really important question, because that's one of the fundamental kind of characteristics or capabilities that I think that the new human is going to have, and that's going to allow us to kind of move our way through all of this. I don't know how to, I think discernment is a byproduct of, again, this increased awareness and openness to the larger world, i.e. raising your consciousness. And I think it also, if discernment is what you're interested in, then you ought to ask the universe, however you define that. Talk to the aliens, whoever you want to talk to, and ask them and tell them you want to increase discernment, you want to understand all these kinds of things. Put it into your mind, into your space before you go to bed and when you dream, and say, give me dreams that'll help me understand this. There are multiple ways in which you can get into this space, but I can assure you that you will not have very good discernment if you don't have a very open mind, because what you will necessarily do, without being very having this open, permeable kind of space that you live in, what you will do is you will cut out, say that's not possible, or that doesn't make sense, or some kind of way in which you just discount it because it, and what you really need is, in this time of high rate of change and uncertainty and extraordinary kind of discoveries and breakthroughs and other kind of things, you've got to just start by saying, I really don't know anything for sure, and anything can happen, and most anything could be real, and you don't want to buy it all, but if you want to at least capture the possibilities that'll allow you to make kind of an effective evaluation, you got to have a big wide net that lets things in, and then you I think discernment is a function of intuition, and you've got to work on that and ask for that, and there are courses and there are things that you can do to develop your intuition if you think that that's what you need to do. I've heard that with new energy that is entering the earth and impacting us, that many people are experiencing physical symptoms, aches and pains. Yeah, we talked about that, as our bodies are adjusting to and working to integrate this new frequency. Can you comment? Yeah, you know what's happening. The most interesting thing that's happening here is which again the Pleiadians talk about, is that there are parts of our DNA that are being activated that have been dormant up until now. You know that they talk about 90+% of your DNA being junk DNA because they can't figure out how it works. Well, it isn't junk DNA. It has utility and it's there for a purpose. But what the Pleiadians are suggesting, and other sources as well, is that there are some pieces of your DNA that control your and I'm not talking about telomeres now or telomeres, that control your aging, and that those could be turned on to allow people to live much longer. That there are aspects of your DNA that could be activated that would allow you to have telepathy. And listen, there are people all over this planet that have extraordinary kind of capabilities. Individuals that have, call them psychics or intuitives or whatever. I've known people that didn't eat, that literally didn't eat, that hadn't eaten for 6 months, and they were very healthy and so on. And you say, well, how does that happen? Well, something in their structural makeup, maybe their DNA or something, has been shifted or turned on or opened or whatever it turns out to be, such that in that particular case they can access energy from the larger system, and it doesn't have to go through food. The point is that there is there are a variety of ways in which you can that you can turn this stuff on, and that we adapt to and adjust to all of that. And you need to again be open and be willing to kind of move into the space. And really be open to these kind of changes, because they're so different. They're so radically different from the kind of the status quo and where we all came from. And so there is it's kind of an integral part of this whole transition to this new human, is that, it's a new human after all, and it's not the same as the old human. And so there are necessarily going to be these kinds of changes, and you need to kind of embrace them and surf the wave into that kind of space and not fight them. And so certainly there are going to be some adjustments. There'll be aches and pains and lethargy and moodiness and some other kind of things that happen as we go through all of this. Among the events foretold in this time is earth changes, meaning that the physical changes to the shape of the continents. Please discuss the consensus or the most probable description of the Earth's coming landscape. I don't know about the Earth's coming landscape, but what I think I understand, or what makes sense to me at least, is that as these waves of energy and affect the sun, what happens is the sun, and as the magnetosphere collapses, more of that energy from the sun, the cosmic rays, hit the Earth, and some of them go all the way down into the center of the Earth. And the center of the Earth, it appears, is not a big molten core of metal, but it is a plasma, and a plasma which is the fourth form of matter. When those energy particles hit the plasma, what they do is they get converted to mass. And as that mass accumulates, what it does is it grows and it gets bigger and bigger. And the Earth then expands. And that's why you see a lot of big holes that are opening in the ground all over the place, and houses and cars and things are falling in, is because the Earth is expanding, and it's expanding because there's getting more and more mass that's growing from the inside out. And so I can't tell you about the coming landscape, but there certainly are plenty of sources that say that there are going to be more earthquakes, more volcanoes, and other such things because of this increasing kind of expansion of the Earth. Do I believe in God? Well, it depends on what you mean by God. Yes, of course. I believe in a universal kind of creative source. I think it's hard to believe that this stuff all just happened. I heard Carl Sagan or somebody that once say, then something happened by accident, then something happened by accident, then something happened by accident. And the reason why we live is because there's a series of these accidents. I don't believe that at all. I think there's intelligent life that's interacting with us, i.e. in alien communities, stellar communities, and so on. And so I think that this has a whole lot more intelligence in it. And I think that the things that I read that are compelling to me suggest that we are all an integral part, a component part of that larger reality. The Hermetic principles say that all is mind, that everything is mind. It is the mind of God, if you will, and that we are, and everything else, the stars, the galaxies, whatever, are all a part of that mind. And so, yeah, I believe that we are absolutely a part of that. I also believe, as I've said in my talks, certainly this one that I just did last December, is that there are a whole kind of hierarchy or distribution of super intelligent creative beings called logos, or by the in the Dead Sea Scrolls, by the and from the Essenes and so on, that have been responsible for creating different aspects of our universe. And they are all part of this larger, integrated, connected kind of being or entity, whatever it is, that is responsible, within which we operate. And then, in fact, I believe that one of those great entities, one of those logi, is in fact the organizing and creative force in the center of the galaxy that has produced the Milky Way, and that in fact it has spun off smaller creative forces, very intelligent, very highly creative and capable forces that then are each one of the stars. So our sun is very much alive, and as is the Earth. And then the sun has been responsible in part for building for creating the planets. And so the whole system is all alive. And so God is God writ large is everywhere and a part of everything. When I go outside of my office here into the woods, that's all God. And I believe that you can engage at different levels within that whole hierarchy. It's hard for me. I mean, I'm not presumptuous enough to think that I can communicate directly with and uniquely to the source of everything. I think that there are some kind of local, quote, gods who are been principally responsible for this part of the universe and this galaxy and this planet and so on. And they are amazingly capable, and they are, in fact, the gods of the Bible, in fact, because they created the local area and so on. And so, yeah, I certainly believe in God, and I think that it's an intrinsically kind of loving system. I think the basic, I believe the biblical notion that God is love, and if you want to get a tangible, the best kind of way in which to get your hands around what God is, then what you ought to do is embrace love, and love in all of its manifestations is the closest that you can get to God. Which is not to say that there are some extraordinary kind of environments, whether they're generated by hallucinogenic drugs or other kind of things that move you into other kind of aspects of this reality that are not kind of part of this usual 3D thing, and so it's very complex and very interesting, far more so than just everyday life suggests. And so it's but I don't think that there's some guy on a cloud somewhere who is kind of pulling the levers for what happens down here. Can you elaborate on what Nasser and Jussera and the new signed USA Republic means from now on? Is the fiat system dead and over? Are we debt free? I don't know about that. There are a lot of people who think that it's in the works. This is some law that was supposedly passed back in the, 60s or something like that, and that provides for a new currency, a new government, new elections, and other such things. And I have no way in the world. I mean, I read and I see all of the reports, and there are a lot of people who really believe that we're close to it, but I don't know how to know for sure. So I really don't have a way to comment with any kind of substance on that. What time frame is the U.S. looking at for World War III to start, and how will the U.S. be impacted? I don't know anything about World War III. The only thing I know about is that Martin Armstrong, like I said earlier, suggests that the civil war, a global civil war, is likely to happen in 2005 through 2007. This is the last question, and it's very long. Do we need a truth and reconciliation process? The 1950s Cold War, fear of attack led to population disbursement, FHA finance for whites only. I'm not going to read all of this. I can't. The high valuations of properties. Many are angry. What's the question? The question is, ironically, anti-communism policies did this. They cratered cities, they inundated hinterlands with commuting gentry, they raised the cost of land and property, but not local wages. Centuries to correct. If the truth is unrecognized, there can't be reconciliation to work toward a dynamic balance to a lean future. This is from Tom Christoffel. Tom, who's a friend of mine. This is complicated. Tom is an urban planner kind of guy, and and his point is that the structure of urbans, with suburbans and other kinds of things, kind of are an argument. It seems like as an argument against the kind of the evolutionary direction that we're all interested in, I just suggest again, Tom, that there's an advantage to living in the countryside, and there's an advantage to being not in large urban areas. And I don't know how you extract yourself from that without the system breaking and then allowing it to reorganize itself. And I think there are a lot of pieces of the system that are not going to work, that are intrinsically unsustainable, that are structurally unsupportable over in time. Our political system is one obvious one that is obviously coming apart, and the financial system, and so on, and education and such. And so that is all part of the collapse of the old system, and I frankly don't know how you fix the old system. In fact, I think it's a waste of time to try to fix the old system, which is why I'm spending all my time on trying to build a new one and understand and make sense out of a new one. Which is not to say that it doesn't make sense and it's worthwhile and for people to try to do that, because we all are in this, each of us has a different kind of role to play, and we have different obligations or purposes, and I have no idea what yours are. And by the way, if there aren't some good people who are trying to get make the present system better, then we'd all be in a worse case and worse situation. But what I know is that for me, that I need to focus on trying to build a new world rather than trying to fix the old one. I worked inside the government, and I don't think there's any way in the world you're going to fix that, no matter what Donald Trump wants to do. I mean, really fundamentally fix it. I think there are certainly kind of some ways that you can extract. You can eliminate some really big problems like the pedophilia and some of the other kind of stuff in there, but the structures of the things are a product of an old way of thinking, and so there's a new way of, we've got to think about things differently, and we got to think about how we structure ourselves and how we live and where we live and all of the aspects of it in a different way. And so that's what I think, that's what I've got to do at least. So thank you all very much, and thanks for your questions. I really appreciate it, and I hope if you want to, and you've got some more, that next week or next month we'll send out an announcement to everybody, and you can send in some questions, and we'll try it again. And I really hope that you'll decide that this is worthwhile, along with the other kind of benefits of the premium membership. Doing things with Greg Braden, and when big events are happening, he and I get together and talk about what that might be. We've got a variety of kind of things that are part of the premium package, and so you might look into that and see if that makes sense for you. We'd love to have you part of that. Thanks so much.